It was supposed to be another quiet Saturday in Meadow Ridge Estate, a gated neighborhood where silence was luxury and laughter was scheduled. Eleanor Brooks sat on a bench near the perfectly manicured playground phone, in one hand cold coffee, in the other eyes distant. Her 7-year-old daughter Lily wandered only a few feet away, as she always did, silent, fragile, tucked inside the invisible cocoon she'd built since the accident. It had been 3 years. 3 years since that rainy night, since her husband's car flipped on Route 86, since Lily watched him bleed out before the paramedics could arrive. She hadn't spoken a word since. Eleanor had tried everything: therapists, trauma specialists, neurologists, even experimental tech from her own company, Horizon Tech, a leader in assistive communication software. Nothing worked. Lily remained a ghost in her own skin, expressive only through sketchbooks and trembling nods. That morning, Eleanor was just happy to see her playing on her own tracing patterns in the mulch. But she didn't notice when Lily stopped drawing in the dirt and turned her head toward the far side of the garden. There was a man crouched by the rose hedges, adjusting the irrigation system. Black mid-30s, calloused hands, worn boots. His name tag barely visible, read Elijah. Most people in the neighborhood never said his name. To them, he was the gardener, the man with the limp who kept to himself. But Lily was watching him. Closely. He must have sensed it because after a moment he looked up and smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile people gave to children out of politeness. It was genuine, warm. Lily stepped forward slowly, as if pulled. Eleanor was mid-text when a shrill voice cracked the air like thunder. "Oh my God, Eleanor, get your daughter away from that man." Celeste Harrington, perfectly pressed and pearl-draped, stormed over, clutching her Chanel tote like a weapon. Her finger jabbed toward the rose bushes. "Are you seriously letting her talk to him?" Eleanor looked up confused until she saw Lily standing right in front of Elijah. And then she heard it. "Hello," Lily said. Just one word. Small, clear. But it echoed louder than anything Eleanor had heard in years. Her coffee hit the ground. Her breath stopped. The world narrowed to her daughter's face. Lily was smiling, shy, tentative. Her eyes never left Elijah's. Elijah didn't flinch. He didn't even look surprised. He nodded once and said softly, "It's nice to meet you, little one." Eleanor tried to move to speak to process, but nothing came out. Celeste was already at Lily's side, tugging at her wrist. "Come away from there, you don't know who he is. Eleanor, seriously, this is not safe." But Lily didn't budge. Her small voice floated again, firmer this time. "He heard me," she said. "He really heard me." Elijah stood slowly brushing dirt from his knees. "You've got a beautiful voice, Lily. Don't let anyone make you hide it again." Then he glanced at Eleanor, eyes calm, unreadable, but deep. She saw something in them. Not fear, not arrogance. Something else. Like he'd been here before. "Have a good day, Mrs. Brooks," he said. And with that he picked up his tools and pushed his cart toward the back gate. Eleanor noticed the slight limp in his left leg, the faded scar trailing up his forearm, details she hadn't seen or had never bothered to. Celeste was still muttering something about security policies and inappropriate boundaries, but Eleanor wasn't listening. Her daughter had spoken. After one narrow 95 days of silence, Lily had broken the wall. Not with a doctor, not with a speech therapist, but with a man no one in this neighborhood even looked in the eye. As Elijah disappeared behind the gate, Eleanor felt something strange stir inside her, a question she couldn't shake. Why him? And who was he really? The next morning, Eleanor arrived at the playground earlier than usual. Lily insisted. She had dressed herself a small miracle in itself and clutched a drawing in her hand, one she'd made the night before. It was a picture of Elijah kneeling beside her in the garden, drawn in crayon strokes, with a little speech bubble floating from her own mouth that simply said, "Hi." Eleanor didn't understand it, but she didn't question it either. She watched from the bench again, arms folded tight, as Lily scanned the perimeter with expectant eyes. And then she saw him, Elijah, unlocking the equipment shed near the flower beds. Same faded work shirt, same quiet focus, like yesterday had never happened. But for Lily, everything had changed. "Mr. Elijah," she called out, and Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Lily's voice out loud in public rang like bells across the lawn. Elijah turned and smiled, his movements unhurried. "Good morning, Lily." She ran to him without hesitation. Eleanor stood half ready to intercept, but froze when she saw the joy in her daughter's face. It was the kind of joy she hadn't seen since before the funeral. "I brought you this," Lily said, offering him the drawing. Elijah looked at it with a reverence few adults ever gave a child's scribbles. "It's beautiful," he said. "That looks just like us." A voice sliced through the moment like cold steel. "Lily Brooks, get away from him right now." Celeste Harrington was back. Heels stabbing into the grass, jaw clenched so tightly her lipstick cracked. "I told you this was unacceptable," she spat, storming across the lawn toward Eleanor. "You promised to speak to her." "He's still here, Eleanor. Still talking to our children." Eleanor straightened, but said nothing. Celeste turned her fury toward Elijah. "You are staff. You are not allowed to fraternize with residents." Elijah didn't flinch. He crouched beside Lily again, calm as the morning breeze. "Did you tell your mom about yesterday?" Lily nodded. "She said you must be a very special person." "Your mom is very wise," Elijah said softly. Celeste let out a disgusted laugh. "This is absurd. Eleanor, do something." "I am," Eleanor said quietly. "I'm watching." Celeste's mouth opened, then closed again. Her control was slipping, and she knew it. "You have no idea who this man is." She hissed, her voice low but seething. "Where he's from. What kind of life he's had." Elijah stood slow and deliberate. He kept Lily's hand gently in his. "You're right, Miss Harrington," he said. "She doesn't know anything about me." Then he looked her straight in the eye. "But neither do you." Celeste recoiled, as if the calm in his tone had unnerved her more than shouting ever could. "I will have you written up," she barked. "You'll be gone by Monday?" "I understand," Elijah replied, nodding respectfully. "I'll be prepared." He turned back to Lily, kneeling again. "Don't forget, soft grass is easier on your feet when you run." Lily giggled. "I told Mommy that yesterday. She said you must be a scientist." Elijah grinned. "Just a man who pays attention." Eleanor finally stepped forward. "Elijah," she said, and he turned to her. There was something burning in her eyes now. Curiosity, maybe guilt, maybe something else. "Do you know about botany a little?" he said. "I worked in community gardens before I moved here. Plants help me stay grounded." Before anyone could respond, Celeste barked, "That's enough. The HOA has rules. This kind of interaction is against every policy we have. Eleanor, please." But Eleanor wasn't looking at her anymore. She was watching Elijah, watching the way he stood, the way his eyes subtly scanned the area. The straightness of his spine, the way he never once turned his back to them. Like a soldier, like someone who had spent his life calculating exits. "Elijah," she said again, quieter this time. "Have you ever worked with children before?" Celeste scoffed. "What kind of question is that? He's a gardener." But Elijah didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Eleanor deeply directly, and there it was again. That unsettling calm, that depth. I've worked with many people who needed help finding their voice, he said finally. Something in his tone and the weight of those words made Eleanor's skin prickle. Lily clutched his hand a little tighter. And Eleanor knew. This man, this quiet, careful man, was not who everyone assumed he was. And she intended to find out exactly who he had been before he became invisible. That night, Eleanor didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen island long after Lily had gone to bed, flipping through reports she never thought she'd care about: HR documents, staff files, digital records of property service contracts. There was nothing unusual about Elijah Grant on paper. Just a few lines about landscaping employment dates, emergency contact information. No degrees, no former job titles, no past affiliations. Almost like someone had wiped his slate clean. But Eleanor had built her fortune on decoding people faster than any algorithm ever could. She knew when someone was hiding something and when they were hiding everything. The next morning, before the sun rose over the hedges of Meadow Ridge, Elijah arrived at the maintenance shed with his usual toolbox and thermos of black coffee. But this time, something was waiting for him. A letter, folded, taped to the gate. Inappropriate behavior with minors. Final warning. Immediate action pending. Signed in elegant cursive by Celeste Harrington, President of the Homeowners Council. Elijah read it once, calmly, then folded it and slipped it into his back pocket without a word. This wasn't new. He had seen this script before. The whispers, the suspicion, the escalation. They always followed the same rhythm. And yet, this time something was different, because this time a little girl had said his name. Elijah. Her voice rang across the lawn as Lily sprinted toward him wearing pink sneakers and a too big sun hat. Eleanor followed behind slower, watching with sharp eyes. Morning, Elijah said, crouching to meet Lily's height. I brought something, Lily announced, proudly pulling a small journal from her tote bag. It's my word book. Mommy said I can start writing down new things I say. That's a brilliant idea, Elijah replied. You'll be full of words soon. Lily beamed. And then the storm arrived. Celeste appeared out of nowhere, flanked by two other councilwomen, Evelyn Sharp and Miranda Colton, both equally pearl-strung and plastic smiling. I warned you, Celeste said coldly, stopping only feet from them. This is your last violation. Elijah stood slow and deliberate. He didn't step back. I'm speaking with a resident who greeted me directly, he said. You know exactly what this is, Miranda snapped. You're manipulating a child. That's dangerous. Eleanor took a step forward. Excuse me, Miranda blinked, caught off guard. I mean, it's inappropriate. And it's against the rules, Evelyn added, holding up a printed document, the HOA conduct policy. No staff member shall engage in extended, unsupervised interactions with residents, especially minors. Elijah looked at the paper, then at Eleanor. Is this official policy? He asked, his voice low and clear. It's been an understanding, Evelyn replied, faltering. An unwritten standard. I'd appreciate seeing it in writing, Elijah said calmly, to ensure I comply. Celeste's nostrils flared. Don't play clever with us. We know what you're doing. Do you? Eleanor interjected. Because from what I see, you're threatening someone who's done more for my daughter in 2 minutes than any therapist has in 3 years. Celeste's face twitched. You're letting your personal emotions cloud your judgment. No, Eleanor said flatly. I'm finally seeing clearly. Elijah didn't smile, but his jaw relaxed slightly as if a tension deep inside him had released. Lily looked between the adults, confused. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart," Eleanor said, kneeling beside her. "You did something brave." Miranda crossed her arms. "I don't know what spell he's put you under, Eleanor, but this is serious. We're hiring a private investigator. If he has skeletons, we'll find them." Elijah's eyes flicked just slightly. Then he nodded. "I'd be happy to provide my full history," he said. "But just so you know, you're not the only ones who know how to document things." Without another word, he turned and walked toward the far side of the property. Not fast, not flustered, but with a quiet resolve. That evening, Eleanor found him beside the tool shed. She held out a small black device, one of Horizon Tech's prototypes, a phone with automatic audio sync. "I left this in the garden," she said. Elijah accepted it silently. There was a moment between them, unspoken but weighty. "You were a soldier," she said. He looked up. His expression didn't change, but his silence spoke volumes. "You walk like one," she added. "And you scan a room like you're memorizing exits. You don't move like someone who trims hedges for a living." Still no response. But his eyes locked onto hers, and she saw something then, not vulnerability, not guilt. Recognition. "I'm not here to expose you," Eleanor said. "I'm here to ask, why are you hiding?" Elijah turned the phone over in his hands. "Because sometimes," he said slowly, "starting over means leaving your name behind." Then he looked at her, and something in his gaze softened. "But sometimes the past catches up anyway." He walked away, then disappearing down the stone path, leaving Eleanor with more questions than answers. That night, Elijah did something he hadn't done in 5 years. He picked up the phone and called Washington, D.C. "Colonel Davidson," he said, his voice steady but thick. "This is Dr. Elijah Grant. I need my full military records." A long pause. "Elijah," the voice on the other end cracked. "My God, where have you been? We've been trying to reach you since the hospital. You just disappeared." "I needed time," Elijah said quietly, staring out the window of his tiny apartment. "But now, I need to prove who I really am." 2 days later, the grand hall of Meadow Ridge Estates buzzed with quiet tension. Eleanor had never seen so many residents gathered in one place. Over 24 families had shown up, called by an emergency meeting organized by Celeste Harrington. The long mahogany table was lined with porcelain teacups, untouched. The curtains were drawn, the air stiff with anticipation and subtle perfume. At the head of the table stood Celeste, pearls, gleaming hair, unmoved, a thick folder clutched in her manicured hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice amplified more by indignation than the microphone, "we are gathered today because our community is at risk. We have a staff member, Elijah Grant, who has on multiple occasions crossed professional boundaries with minors, displayed suspicious behavior, and refused to follow protocol." A few heads nodded hesitantly. Others simply watched. "I move," she continued dramatically, "for his immediate dismissal and permanent banishment from this property." Murmurs echoed across the hall. Then a voice rose from the back of the room. "May I speak before the vote?" All heads turned. Elijah stood at the very end of the room, still in his gardener's uniform, but holding himself taller than ever. His shoulders squared, his limp gone. Celeste's lips curled. "You are not a resident, Mr. Grant." "No," Elijah said calmly. "But I am the subject of this meeting, and I'd like to respond to the accusations made against me." A beat passed, then a reluctant nod. Elijah walked to the front with a slow, measured pace. From his pocket, he pulled a sealed envelope. "Before you make your decision, I'd like to present a few facts." He opened the envelope and laid its contents on the table. "This is my complete military file," he said. "Dr. Elijah Grant, former combat surgeon with the United States Army, 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 Bronze Stars for valor, 1 presidential citation for exceptional medical service." The room fell silent. In 2017, he continued, "I led an emergency surgical effort that saved 17 children trapped in a bombed hospital in Kandahar. 14 hours of surgery under enemy fire. No losses." He paused, scanning the room. Some faces were blank, some ashamed, some stunned. "And when I came home," Elijah said softly, "I couldn't find work. Despite my degrees, despite my record, despite saving lives, 12 hospitals turned me down. No calls back, just closed doors." He looked directly at Celeste. "Because people like you don't see doctors. You see a skin tone, a limp, a man with dirt on his hands." Celeste turned pale but held her ground. "That doesn't excuse," Elijah cut her off with eerie calm. "Oh, I'm not finished." From his other pocket, he pulled out a small audio recorder. "Let's talk about behavior." He pressed play. Celeste's voice blared into the room. "You know people like him, always working some angle, probably after hush money or worse." The room shifted, chairs creaked, gasps escaped. He pressed another button. Margaret Thornton's voice, sharp and smug. "I've seen the way he looks at the kids. I don't trust it." And then another. Miranda Colton, laughing softly. "He's targeting Victoria because of her mute daughter. Easy prey." Eleanor stood. "I've heard enough," she said, stepping beside Elijah. "So has my daughter." She turned to the crowd. For 3 years, Lily didn't speak. No therapy worked. No doctor helped. Then Elijah knelt beside her, and she found her voice again. She reached into her bag and placed a folder on the table. "I had my team verify his background. His degrees are real. His work at Baltimore Children's Hospital is real. He's not just a war hero. He's a specialist in trauma recovery, particularly with children." She looked back at Elijah. "You gave me back my daughter." Elijah said nothing, but his eyes shimmered. Eleanor turned again. "I've offered Dr. Grant a new position, Director of Human Wellness at Horizon Tech. He starts Monday." Celeste's face twisted. "You planned this, all of this?" Elijah finally spoke. "No," he said. "I just spoke to a child who needed to be heard. Everything else, that was you." He faced the room. "And the things you said, I didn't have to record them in secret. You said them out loud, in public, because you didn't think anyone would hold you accountable." The silence was deafening. Eleanor stepped forward once more. "As legal counsel for this community," she said coldly, "I'm reporting Celeste Harrington, Margaret Thornton, and Miranda Colton for racial discrimination, harassment, and defamation. The recordings will be turned over to the district attorney this afternoon." Miranda stood abruptly. "You can't do this. We're respected women." "You were," Elijah said quietly. "Now you're just a cautionary tale." He took a breath. "And one last thing," he added with a small smile. "I just bought the penthouse in Building 5. Celeste staggered. "You?" "What, I'm not leaving," Elijah said. "I'm staying, as your neighbor." He turned to walk out. Lily ran to him, slipping her hand in his. He didn't need to say anything else, because the room had already heard the loudest statement of all. The man they tried to silence was now the only one who'd truly been heard. 6 months later, the world looked different from 23 floors up. Elijah stood by the window of his office at Horizon Tech, overlooking the city skyline. His name, Dr. Elijah Grant, Director of Human Wellness and Inclusion, was etched in clean chrome on the glass wall behind him. But titles didn't matter to him, not anymore. What mattered were the numbers 247. That was the number of children who, thanks to the therapeutic programs he had designed, were now speaking, drawing, laughing, healing. Some had survived abuse, others trauma, but all of them had once been silent. And now they had a voice. Dr. Grant, his assistant, said from the doorway, "The city council meeting is confirmed for 3 p.m. They want your input on expanding the program statewide." Elijah nodded, adjusting the lapel of his tailored suit. "Thank you." Across the city in a plain legal office on the east side, Celeste Harrington sat beneath fluorescent lighting, signing her final divorce papers. Her husband had left her after hearing the court recordings, ashamed to share a name with someone who could speak so hatefully in public. Her reputation gone. Her circle of influence evaporated. Her only visitors now were lawyers. "Your alimony will be $1,200 a month," the clerk told her. "And the condo at Meadow Ridge has been awarded to your ex-husband." Celeste stared blankly ahead, lips pressed so tight they trembled. From president of the Homeowners Association to tenant in a suburban one-bedroom, she'd fallen fast and far, not from a scandal, but from her own voice played back for the world to hear. She wasn't the only one. Margaret Thornton's husband had lost his re-election bid for mayor after her comments went viral. Miranda Colton's investors had pulled out of her wellness brand, citing misalignment with inclusive values. Their names were now punchlines in national op-eds about privilege, prejudice, and public disgrace. Back in Meadow Ridge, the once exclusive playground had been renamed. A new plaque gleamed at the park gate, Dr. Elijah Grant Park, in honor of healing courage and inclusion. Lily Brooks stood beneath it, giggling with 2 other girls as she drew chalk butterflies on the sidewalk. "When I grow up," she told them, "I'm going to be a doctor like Uncle Elijah. I'll help kids who are scared like I was." Her mother, Eleanor, watched from a nearby bench, eyes glistening with quiet pride. Elijah arrived that afternoon, as he always did on Fridays. But this time, he wasn't pushing a cart of tools. He pulled up in a charcoal BMW parking beside Eleanor's Audi. He waved at Lily, who ran into his arms like clockwork. Eleanor smiled. "City council meeting go well. They approved the expansion to 5 more cities," Elijah said, "and offered me a permanent seat on the Public Health Advisory Board." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Are you actually considering it?" He shrugged. "I didn't come this far to stop at one garden." She laughed, soft, genuine. "You know, I used to think I had the whole world figured out." "I remember," Elijah said with a grin. "You changed more than Lily's life." She added, voice quieter now. "You changed mine." Elijah didn't answer right away. He looked toward the far edge of the park, where a young black father stood awkwardly near the swing, set his son clinging shyly to his leg. They looked out of place, nervous, like they didn't belong. Without hesitation, Elijah walked toward them. "First time here?" he asked the man kindly. "Yes, sir," the father replied, surprised. "My wife just got hired at Horizon Tech. We just moved in." Elijah extended his hand. "Welcome to the neighborhood. I live in Building 5. If you ever need anything, I'm right upstairs." The man's relief was instant, like someone had cracked a window in a stifling room. Later, as Elijah and Eleanor walked back to their cars, she looked over and asked, "You know, you could have just walked away, moved on, forgiven them silently." Elijah stopped. The sun was setting behind him, casting a silhouette long across the grass. "It was never about revenge," he said. "It was about making sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else." Eleanor nodded slowly. Did they ever apologize? They tried, Elijah said. In private, after the lawsuits, after the headlines. And she asked. I didn't need it, he replied, because I wasn't waiting for them to change. I was building something they couldn't tear down. A small voice called from the playground. Uncle Elijah, are you coming to my recital next week? Elijah smiled. I wouldn't miss it for the world. They walked into the golden evening, the sound of children's laughter trailing behind them. Elijah had learned something in the quietest years of his life. The best revenge isn't destruction, it's dignity. It's living in a way that makes your enemies irrelevant, their words weightless, their judgment useless. They had tried to bury him beneath assumptions, but they forgot he was a seed. And now he was blooming not just for himself, but for every child who needed to be heard, every parent who needed to believe, and every neighbor who had ever been told they didn't belong.